Do the Texans have to keep this member of their 2023 roster that's set to be a free agent? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans, and let's talk about the Texans keeping a key player from 2023, and I feel like they have to keep this player. Shouldn't even let him hit free agency, and if he does hit free agency, don't let him leave to go to another team, and that's tight end Dalton Schultz. I very much feel like the Texans need to bring Schultz back on this team. And there's three reasons why I believe that. One, he fits really well with where the Texans are right now, how they've structured their offense, and how they're going to operate in 2024. He's really hard to replace, and there's not a lot of great options for it. And investing in Dalton Schultz doesn't keep the Texans from filling in some of their other needs on this team. So let's talk about the fit for Dalton Schultz. He fits incredibly well in this offense. Just listen to CJ Stroud talk about how important Dalton Schultz was to this team. You heard CJ Stroud, if you watch the interview with The Pivot, talk about Dalton Schultz a handful of times and how he and Schultz very much were on the same page with pre-snap line of scrimmage adjustments. He specifically mentions plays that happened over the course of the season, one in Cincinnati where Schultz couldn't even really hear CJ Stroud, but he just kind of knew what Stroud was looking for in that moment. Stroud was able to hit him for a big play. He talks about how Schultz instinctively carried a certain route down the field that opened things up for other players on the field. And just hearing CJ Stroud talk about Dalton Schultz, it feels like he really likes throwing the football to Schultz. And I feel like another great example of how well he fits with CJ Stroud is the end of the Atlanta game where he, Dalton Schultz, Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, all got together and decided to run a play that they hadn't run since training camp, and they were able to get that go-ahead score. Now, obviously, the team didn't hold on for the win, but that was one of the biggest throws of the season from C.J. Stroud, and Dalton Schultz was on the receiving end of it. He was third in receiving yards on this team, and we talked a little bit about how schematically he fits. He's a really nice player. He's one of the most productive tight ends in all of football over the past couple of years, and I'm excited to see how they could go about using him even more when, I don't know, the rushing attack is better, when you have Tank Dell for an entire season. Nico Collins gets even better. Most people expect their players to get better in the offseason, certainly when they're younger players. And Schultz, he fits perfectly, even if the Texans want to invest a little bit more and run the football more. He fits perfectly even if the Texans want to add another receiver that they feel like they need to get the ball to. He fits in really nicely at the way the Texans are going to operate. And I feel like paramount amongst all of that, C.J. Stroud really likes him. Now, I'm not saying you should tailor to every need for C.J. Stroud, but the way Stroud talks about Schultz, it feels like they have a unique and special connection. Now, replacing Dalton Schultz would be very difficult. There are not very many players that are his caliber that are going to be available. Look at the 2023 receiving leaders at tight end. Schultz checks in right over here in the middle of this graph, but you look at who's ahead of him, and those guys are not available anytime soon. George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Evan Ingram, TJ Hawkinson, they all have contract extensions with their team. Sam Laporta, he's a rookie. He's going to go into his second year in the NFL, already one of the best tight ends in football. And no, there's not a Sam Laporta in this upcoming draft that the Texans can realistically get. Sure, Brock Bowers is really good, the rookie from Georgia, but he's not going to get to the Texans. David Njoku's not going anywhere. Trey McBride's not going anywhere. Ferguson, Kmet, Kincaid, Pitts, they're not going anywhere. So you look at who the big-time tight ends are from this past season, where Schultz kind of fits with those guys. There's not going to be an opportunity to go and get one of those players. And I don't want to trade for anybody off of another team's roster and then have to pay that guy or invest money in him in addition to the draft picks that the Texans have to go and invest. And then, my goodness, hold your nose, close your eyes, look at this free agency class. Dalton Schultz is the top receiving leader in this free agency class. Then you're talking about Hunter Henry, Noah Fant, Gerald Everett, and a bunch of guys that you've kind of heard of, but you probably haven't. Maybe you've picked them up in desperation in fantasy football. So if you don't keep Dalton Schultz, what are you doing? You're going to sign Hunter Henry, Gerald Everett. Those guys aren't going to bring back the same level of production that Schultz is. Schultz is one of the most productive tight ends in football over the past 4 seasons. There's only a handful of guys that have more receiving yards and are better at the tight end spot than him over the past 4 seasons. You start talking about the big names like Kelsey and Kittle and Andrews, and then you throw in a guy like Dallas Goedert and stuff like that as far as statistically ahead of Dalton Schultz over the past 4 seasons. And, by the way, it's not like Schultz is some old guy in the last gasp of his career. He's 27. He'll be 28 this season. Investing in him makes a whole lot more sense than investing in a couple of other guys in free agency or trying to shoehorn a draft pick in there when there are other needs that need to get filled. And there's nobody that can effectively replace Dalton Schultz on the roster. Tegan Quintiriano has never stayed healthy in his NFL career. Brevin Jordan had some injury issues this past year, but he's not a full-time replace Dalton Schultz one-for-one tight end. So when you start thinking about replacing Dalton Schultz, it becomes even more apparent that the Texans should keep Dalton Schultz. And most notably about Dalton Schultz, investing in him doesn't keep you from investing in various other players. If you give Dalton Schultz, say, a 2 or 3 year contract that averages anywhere from, say, $9 to $12 million a year, that doesn't keep you from improving the running back situation, signing a veteran at the cornerback spot, going out there and keeping Jonathan Grenard or replacing him with a different defensive end. It's worth investing in Schultz because not only is it hard to replace him, it's not going to keep you from doing something else. It's not going to keep you from, like I said, re-signing some other key players or improving a couple of spots with a free agent or extending a couple of players. So when you factor in that he fits so well, and we're just starting to scratch the surface on what he brings to the table in this offense, wouldn't it be nice to have the top 3 pass catchers back from last year's team? And oh, by the way, add to it with maybe a dynamic running back and a rookie wide receiver. That'd be a pretty impressive offense to think about in 2024. Replacing him is nearly impossible. You're going to just hope and pray if Dalton Schultz is playing for another team that you found a way to replace his level of production. There's not a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-1 replacement for Dalton Schultz out there that the Texans can go out there and find. And most notably, investing in him doesn't keep the Texans from doing something else. I would bet the Texans see this the same way. I would think that Dalton Schultz is going to be on this team. I really hope so. I feel like they need to bring Dalton Schultz back for all the reasons I just listed. I told you I'd bet that he's back. If you want to bet, you certainly can. Our partner, BetUS. The link in the description down below is where you can get signed up. Gamble on anything and everything. College basketball, pro basketball, baseball's right around the corner. And, of course, the end of football season gets here on Super Sunday. Get in there, deposit at least $50, and get started with our friends at BetUS, and you can start wagering on whatever you might like with BetUS. Our friends at BetUS, support them. They're great supporters of the channel. What say you? Are you keeping Dalton Schultz? Is he as important as I made him seem? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Plenty more to come in this offseason. Lots of fun stuff headed your way here on the channel, so you don't want to miss out on any of it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Appreciate you watching, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.